The chamber of the Galactic Council, a monument to 1,000 years of arrogant peace, was shattered by one frantic voice. High Counselor Xylar, whose species had run the council for centuries, slammed a fist on his console. His regal bearing was gone, replaced by pure incandescent fury. "What do you mean it failed?" he hissed, his voice echoing in the sudden, sharp silence. His subordinate, a trembling aide, flinched. "The reports are confirmed, High Counselor. The assassination. It didn't work. The human ambassador? He survived!" Xylar scoffed, a sound like grinding stone. "Survived? One human against our most elite Alpha squad? Impossible. They were the best. Send another team, a bigger one. I want this primitive dealt with before his species can even figure out what happened." The aide swallowed, a tremor running through his frame. "That's the other thing, High Counselor. The Alpha Squad, they didn't just fail. They were wiped out. Every last one of them." He paused. "And we just got a message. From the humans. It's for the entire Galactic Council, and it's playing on all channels. Right now. To the rest of the galaxy, Ambassador Elias Thorne was an academic, a historian. He was a soft-spoken man in a simple suit who talked about treaties and shared culture. He was the face of a species the Council saw as weak and disorganized. Loud, emotional primitives who had stumbled into space by sheer luck. They saw his politeness as weakness, his calls for diplomacy as begging. They couldn't have been more wrong. You see, humanity had learned from its own brutal history. It learned that real peace is never given. It's earned, and it's defended. So when it was time for first contact, they didn't send their scholars or their politicians. They sent their quietest, deadliest weapons. The Human Diplomatic Corps was a lie. It was an organization of ghosts and special operations legends. These men and women were living weapons, trained not just in negotiation, but in counterinsurgency, close-quarters combat, and strategic demolition. Elias Thorne wasn't just an ambassador. He was a graduate of the infamous Reaper program, a soldier so effective he'd become a ghost story enemy. Soldiers told their squad mates in the dark they were warriors pretending to be diplomats, and the galaxy had just made the colossal mistake of trying to kill one. Across the capital world, every screen flickered to life. No greeting, no preamble. Just the cold, stark view from Ambassador Thorne's own suit camera. The embassy hall was suddenly filled with the silent, menacing shapes of Xylar's Alpha Squad. The entire council watched, frozen, as the attack began. A Xithani warrior lunged, its energy blade humming. But the recording showed something that shouldn't be possible. Thorne moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. He didn't just dodge. He flowed, using the assassin's own momentum against it. A hidden blade of his own appeared in his hand as if from nowhere. The first assassin fell without a sound. Then the second. The footage wasn't a movie. It was raw, efficient, and brutally personal. The Council saw their most feared warriors dismantled in seconds by the primitive they'd laughed at. Thorne moved like a phantom, every strike precise, disabling, and final. It was over in less than a minute. The only one left standing was the human diplomat, his suit barely scorched, his breathing perfectly steady. Then the video cut to black. The silence in the council chamber was absolute, a vacuum of disbelief and dawning horror. A new voice filled the void. It was calm, measured, and completely stripped of emotion. It was human, but this wasn't the voice of a diplomat. This was Terran Fleet Command. For 200 years, you have mistaken our restraint for weakness. You mistook our politeness for fear. You believed our diplomats were simply messengers. That was your first and last miscalculation. The voice paused, letting the words hang in the air across 1,000 worlds. Our diplomats are not our messengers. They are our first line of defense. They are the yardstick by which we measure a species' intentions. We send our most disciplined and most lethal soldiers to speak of peace, because only those who have mastered the art of war can truly value the alternative. Ambassador Thorn wasn't an exception. He is the standard. Another pause, this one feeling far more dangerous. You targeted an envoy of peace. You tried to silence one human voice. So we will respond in a language you understand. We are sending a new diplomatic delegation. It won't be a single man. An entire fleet, our 7th Expeditionary Peacekeeper Force, has just entered your home system. On the main view screen, a new image appeared. A live feed from the edge of Zethani space. Dozens of colossal, gray human warships hung silently in the void. They weren't firing. They were just there. They are on their way to negotiate the terms of your unconditional surrender. You have one planetary rotation to disband your fleets and prepare for their arrival. This is the only warning you will receive. This is the only negotiation we will offer. The time for talking is over. The time for listening has begun. In the Galactic Council chamber, the facade of 1,000 years of dominance shattered. High Counselor Xylar stared at the screen, his posture no longer regal, but frozen in pure terror. This wasn't a raiding party. It was an occupation force. His own arrogance, once his greatest strength, now felt like a lead weight in his gut. Delegates who had supported the hit, who had laughed at the primitive humans, were now frantically scrambling. Shouts erupted, not of defiance, but of blame. The Xereth delegate, whose people were famed for their stoicism, was visibly shaking. The Lore Corps representative, a being of pure energy, flickered erratically, a clear sign of extreme distress. They hadn't just poked a sleeping beast. They had stormed its home, attacked its young, and now they realized that beast was a god of war. The psychological blow was devastating. The humans weren't hiding weakness. They were exercising a level of restraint that was almost incomprehensible, and the Council, in its infinite arrogance, had just convinced them to stop. The fear in the room wasn't about a failed assassination anymore. It was about extinction. A single terrifying thought spread through the chamber like a virus. What have we done? Humanity's entire strategy was born from its own blood-soaked history. They'd fought wars over land, faith, and pride. They had perfected the art of destruction, and in doing so, learned a terrible truth. Peace can't be kept by those who are unprepared for war. True peace is the child of overwhelming absolute strength. It's the quiet confidence that any act of aggression will be met with such devastating force that it becomes unthinkable. So they sent their soldiers to be diplomats. They sent the men and women who had seen the absolute worst of their own species, because only they could be trusted to stop it from ever being unleashed on another. An ambassador like Elias Thorne wasn't just a negotiator. He was a walking deterrent. A man with the power to level a city who chooses to talk is a much more powerful statement than any fleet in orbit. The Galactic Council had assumed humanity was like them, that you send your weakest to talk and your strongest to fight. They failed to understand a core piece of human psychology. Humanity sends its strongest to do both. The ambassador wasn't a lie. He was a warning. A warning the entire galaxy had just failed to read. If you enjoy stories of humanity revealing its true, terrifying strength, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And let us know in the comments, if you were on the Galactic Council, what would you do? Is there any way to survive what's coming? As the clock ticked down, the human peacekeeper fleet made no move. They simply waited, a silent testament to a promise being kept. In his chamber, High Counselor Xylar watched the view screen, the reflection of the human ships burning in his eyes. He saw no anger in their presence, no rage. He saw something far, far worse, a cold, calculated, and inevitable consequence. The age of the Council's absolute power was over. They had tried to make an example of one human to show their dominance, and now the entire galaxy would pay the price. It would finally learn what humanity truly was, a species that sends its deadliest soldiers as messengers of peace, and a species whose patience, once it runs out, will never return. The galaxy was about to get its final lesson in diplomacy, and it was going to be delivered at the barrel of a gun.